Alright, welcome back to the channel once again. Today we have a video that's been a long time coming. We're going to show you how to change your timing chain, tensioner, phasers, all that good stuff to get rid of the startup rattle on your 3.5 liter Ecoboost engine. Now this procedure is specific to the F-150 because of the engine configuration here, but the same idea and the same fix applies to like the Show and the Flex and stuff like that. Any of the other vehicles that use 3.5 liter Ecoboost engine. Now the idea here is that because of an oil pressure loss or something going on with the phasers, it's causing timing chain stretch. So you might get a rattle on startup for 2 seconds or so. It goes away after that. So before it gets too bad and starts eating up the cover from that chain slapping around in there, we're going to go into this one today and we're going to show you how to change it out, all the parts, the latest and greatest parts from Ford to fix this issue hopefully once and for all. The very first thing we need to do is drain the coolant and the engine oil. So let's get started.
Alright, down here underneath the vehicle in the very front, we're going to remove the splash shield right here. A couple turn lock fasteners, we have some push pins, and the thing falls right off. And then we're also going to pull the skid plate off of here, a couple 13mm bolts, and it falls right down. And it's going to be heavy, so be ready when you pull that down. That way we have better access to the front of the engine, and we also are able to get in here and drain that coolant. Alright, now with that splash shield removed, we can see, parts of the engine up in there, and that's going to help for the removal and install process. So that's off of there. Next, let's come over here to the passenger side frame rail right here in the front, and we're going to get up in here. You see that red knob right there? That's the coolant drain for the radiator. So just turn it to the left once the vehicle's nice and cool, and we'll drain the coolant out. Now it's going to spill out all over the frame rail here. It's just going to splash everywhere. It's directly in line with it. So what I do is I'll get a 5/16 hose or so and stick it on that nipple and bring it down to my coolant bucket. So it's a nice clean drain of the cooling system. Now once the coolant starts draining out of there, you're going to want to come over here and remove your degas bottle cap, and then it'll start draining much faster. Alright, now with the coolant draining, let's go ahead and drain the engine oil pan out. A lot of these Ecoboosts, they have the big old sound shield down here, a couple fasteners, and it falls right off, big old felt cover on there, and then we can drain that out of there. It's a 15mm.
Alright, back up here in the engine compartment, let's start taking off some of this, the CAC tubing, the air filter, the appearance cover, disconnect the battery, stuff like that, and then we'll get deep in there and we'll show you how to remove the intake, and then we'll just go from there. Valve covers and front covers and all that good stuff. Now if I didn't mention it already, all the latest and greatest parts, including torque specs and torque sequences, everything will be down below in the video description, so you have a good general reference for this job. Okay, so let's go ahead and disconnect the battery. 8mm on here. We'll loosen it, and then we'll just take it off of there and isolate it, your battery ground. Wrap it up, put it off to the side, and then you can start getting rid of some of this air intake tubing here. 8mm clamps all the way around. Just start loosening them. And then there's a lot of different hoses that just clamp on or quick disconnect. We have our intake air sensor right here. A couple of clamps right there, and this whole thing will fall right off of here. Our air filter housing. It's kind of rigid. Next, we'll pull this air intake crossover off. It's 8mm clamp right here and right here. So we'll go ahead and loosen those. And it should come right off. Get down in here and loosen this one. Okay. Just simply pull these pieces apart. A little wiggling. It just comes apart. Alright, now once those pieces are off, we can come over here and go after the air intake tube for the right hand turbo. We're going to follow down and over,
Now on the 2011 and 2012 models, there's a bypass hose right here. So we'll simply squeeze the clamp, pull it back, pull the hose off, leave the hose in place, and we'll just go after the hard plastic. Whereas 13 and newer, you don't have to deal with that. Either way, you're gonna have to come over here in the wheel well and get to that clamp where it attaches to the turbo. You see it right there? Let me try to focus for you. You can see it down in there. We're just going to loosen that through the wheel well here, and we can slide that right off. And then once the clamp is loose, you simply wiggle a little bit, get it past a couple other pipes on here, spin it around, and just kind of try to work it out of there, like so. Now the one thing I didn't mention is the tube that goes right here, the vacuum tube that goes to the wastegate solenoid. Make sure you just pop that off, it just pushes on. We can get this out of here. Alright, next we'll pull the engine appearance cover off. So pull the oil cap, get it out of the way, and then you simply lift in the front here, get it past a couple hoses, out of the way. And then we'll go after the air inlet for the left-hand turbo. Comes off the same exact way the passenger side did. So there's a couple little hoses, a bypass, and then a clamp on the actual turbo. As you can see, it's starting to open up inside the engine compartment here with all these different big tubes out of the way, and it's only going to get easier from this point on out as we pull more and more off. So let's go after the canister purge valve, check valves, and aspirator lines and take it off as one unit. Now this is very easy to do. I'll try to get you in here and let you guys see exactly how to do it. There's an 8mm bolt right here for the bracket, and then there's an electrical connector right here. So we'll just depress that and get it out of the way. And then this is the evap line coming from the charcoal canister. So you simply squeeze in on these, and then it pushes out the other side, and then you pull the line right off. And then you're gonna follow this over. We're gonna leave all this together, and we're going to disconnect it from the intake manifold. Same thing. Squeeze together. Pulls right off. Very simple. And then you follow the aspirator lines over. We took this one off earlier for the inlet for the driver's side turbo. But on this side, there's another one over here. Big boy over here. But it just comes off the same way. Squeeze them together, push it up, and then it comes off. Okay? So at this point, the whole thing is loose. We just need to pull this 8mm bolt off of here. Let's see if I can do that. And don't lose it. And this whole thing will come off with some finagling out of there. Now mind you, I'm doing this one-handed, so it'll be much easier for you guys. But this is the idea. Comes off one unit, off to the side. Now for me, everything I do on here, when I pull off bolts like this, they're different sizes, different thread pitch, all that weird stuff. You don't want to lose them down the intake or anything like that. So what I'll do is I'll simply take them, because they are different, and put them in, 5, 6 threads, so we don't lose them, and then they're in the proper place for assembly. All right, next we're going to remove the air inlet tube right here, coming from the charge air cooler. So there's an 8mm clamp right there, and then there's the boost pressure sensor right here. Make sure you depress this tab all the way in and even push the connector forward before yanking it off of here. These tend to stick from the heat. Get that out of the way. And then we're going to follow this down over to the charge air cooler. So I'll try to bring it down there and show you how to disconnect down here. So bring it up and around there so you can see. Here's the other end of it right here, and there's a retaining ring built right into it. It's a quick connect. What's very easy about these is that you can grab the spring like so with your finger almost and pull it out. Just like that. Just kind of pull it out of there, and then you pick it up like so, all the way around, and you do the same thing over here, just like so, It's completely out of there. At that point, there we go. And then you simply give it a wiggle, and it comes up and off of there. Now once you pull it out of here, you're going to notice there's quite a bit of oil in here. Let's give you a look-see here and let it all drain down. There's going to be lots of oil in here. Perfectly normal, okay? It's going to happen a lot with boosted engines. There's going to be a lot of oil carryover, and that's exactly why I recommend catch can on any Ecoboost engine. Anyways, we're going to take this ring and we're just going to lock it back in to the grooves on here, and it'll just lock in all the way around. Those kind of snap back in and fall into place just like that. You'll see all the retainers like that, and that's ready to go back on upon reassembly. You may want to get in there and clean all this extra oil out of there, but remember, your charge air cooler is going to be filled with it anyway. It's just going to introduce more in there and more and more. Good reason to get a catch can. Now, as far as the turbo outlet pipes right here you see coming out of the driver's side and the passenger side, we only need to take off the driver's side. On the passenger side here, you see it comes up and over, right over to the charge air cooler. It's not really in our way. We'll probably pull that pressure line off of there and get it out of there, but that's about it. The driver's side one, though, it comes across front cover and the valve cover and all that, so we're going to get that out of the way. Now over here, it simply has a clamp right there, you see it? We'll loosen that, and then you follow it up and over to right here. It's got a little grommet right there, holds it in. Now you pull it up and off of there, you're going to bump this elbow right here. And the seal on here is very finicky, I guess you could say. So you don't want to disturb that too much, else it may cause a leak. So I actually loosen or pull up these two bolts, pop it up out of the grommets, and I'll pull it away a little bit while I get that out of the way so we can snake it out of there. And follow it over to right here. There's an 8mm bolt right there in the front cover for a support bracket. And you continue following it over. Let's get you down in here. And we'll show you right there. So we'll go ahead and we'll loosen it. It's the bottom one down there. We'll loosen the clamp and we'll get it out of there. One-piece unit. Okay, so here is a great view of the intake manifold. Hopefully the video doesn't get too shaky or anything like that because I want you up and high and you can see everything that's going on here. Now you can see there's a lot of lines everywhere. There's a couple bolts and connectors and stuff like that. Just a lot of small stuff to get out of the way. Besides that, you know, it's a few bolts and the thing lifts right off of there. So the very first thing I do with any intake removal is I clean around every little connection around the gasket sealing surface with some compressed air to make it as clean as possible in the end. Now you may notice that the Pcv port on this side is covered. We took off earlier, and then up here by the throttle body, there's a rag inside of there to keep debris from getting in there too. See, these things are just a trap for all kinds of debris. All right, let's get a couple connections up here done and removed, and then we can go in a little bit closer to the rest of the intake there. So right here's your throttle body connector. You want to pull back on the red locking tab, and it's going to be a little tight. I'll press in the black tab, and we'll release it. And then there's a retainer right here in the throttle body for the wire harness. So you want to get a cat claw in there, grab it, pull it out a little bit, grab it, pull it out a little bit, and we can save that retainer that way. Our Pcv line right here, pull back on this gray connector. Right here you'll see it, and then it simply pulls right off. And the same thing over here. Now up here, this is actually a vacuum line for the booster system, and I think this is actually the upgraded line with dual check valves and all that for the vacuum pump issues they had in 11 and 12. But look at this. Oh yeah, you may want to check yours. It should not do that. This should be a dual clamp system on the new ones. where both clamps are on there. So if someone's been in here, they didn't install the recall parts right, you name it. So when going back together, this one's obviously done for, but this clamp is just fine. So we'll push it all the way forward and make that nice and tight again so we have brakes at all times. So we have that disconnected. All right, let's get some of these other connections off of here so we can unbolt the manifold and lift it off of here. So right here is the push fastener for the retainer for the wastegate solenoid. So it simply comes up in the center, then it's loose enough, we can just spin that out of the way, and I'll lock it back down. And then the wastegate solenoid is simply kind of like presses onto a plastic tang, I guess you could say, or whatever. It just kind of wedges onto the manifold here. So you just need to get underneath there and give it a good pry. Maybe something like this, and we'll just get her up and off of there. There we go. Just be very careful. You don't want to break off any plastic on the intake. You know, once this thing starts moving side to side, it'll come right off of here. Like so. And then back here, there's a clamp for one of these vacuum hoses. So we'll just take that off. All right, let's go after the map sensor. There's a connector right here, and then there's a retainer right here. It's a natural color retainer for the harness. Again, get the cat claw in there, try to save it, and we'll just lift it up and out of there. And then for the map sensor, depress the connector and pull it back. All right. Now, as far as all these vacuum lines go that are going to the wastegate actuators and the boost tube over here and all that stuff, all these thin ones, just follow them over to their endpoints and just kind of cat claw them right off. That is, push right on. We can get this mess of lines out of here, along with this connector for the wastegate solenoid. And we just get the whole mess out of here. And then once all those connections are disconnected, you could take the tree out all in one piece. All right, so the intake right now is pretty much free, except for the high pressure fuel pump lines are coming out over it. So we need to disconnect those. We're gonna have to pull those off anyways to pull the driver's side valve cover, so it doesn't matter. So we can just get, like this out of the way right now. We'll pull the insulator off of here to expose the high pressure pump. Now, this right here is in your way. Man, that's tight fitting. Anyways, so right here is your low pressure line coming in from the fuel tank, and then we have a high pressure over here. Now, these are deformed to fit type fittings, but according to the workshop manual, if you only take off this side, it's okay to reuse. So we're good to go there. But they want the bolts on either side of the high pressure pump replaced, and I think they're torque to yield, and there's a nut right here. They want that changed out too, so I bought those as part of the kit. Make it like new for them. So let's go ahead and clean off this area, and then we'll pull the fittings, and then we'll start pulling the high pressure pump, get it out of the way, so we can get these fittings out of the way and pull the intake. Now this connector on here has a lock on it, a blue lock, and you want to kind of lift it like that, okay? And then you're going to take both sides of this, squeeze it, and push it through while you're holding this. Be ready for any kind of fuel spillage or leakage. At this point, the vehicle's so cold and been sitting so long, and neither one of these lines will have pressure in them. Let's go ahead and clean off. Now back here, there's also an electrical connector with a tab in the bottom side for the pump, for the control valve. So we'll disconnect that, and then we'll just do these two lines. So let's get our rag underneath here and ready. We'll try to do this for you. Give it a little wiggle just to get the O-ring moving in there. And then we'll push this through this lock so we can lift the line off of here. It's gotta come all the way through. After that, always keep your hand over it, rag over it, something, just in case it has pressure. It doesn't go right in your face. Okay, so there we go. A little residual. Now, because fuel cleanliness is so important, especially in the high pressure side, it's best to just wrap these suckers up and put them off to the side here. I get you out of the way. Now I get you out of the way. Okay, hopefully you guys can see it still. Okay, let's take off this nut. We'll just loosen it, and at that point, we can just pull these two 10mm bolts, and this whole thing comes out of here. All right, let's loosen the nut on the line here, the high pressure line, so it's followed down to right about here, and you'll see an 8mm nut. Okay, there we go, and this is the one they want us to change out also. Now these flare nuts are usually always a 17mm, and sure enough, this one is too. So we'll just loosen this a bit. Again, these should have no pressure in them right now, but let's go ahead and wrap a shop towel around it. On the bottom side here, it's got a little residual fuel. That's about it though. You just loosen it enough and slow enough, and if there's anything in there, you'll see it spraying out pretty good. And you just stop right there. You can see there's nothing coming out of here. So let's continue turning it off of there. Keep the rag underneath it. It's gonna spill a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right. Oh, these are definitely torque to yield. Got some good torque to them. Turn a bit longer. All right, one last time. I'll do a light cleaning around it because we are opening up the engine pretty much at this point as it goes through the valve cover to the valve train. And there's all kinds of gaskets and everything in here. Now yours may pop like that because it's under, the cam lobe is obviously facing up. You don't know. Going back in, we'll face it down so we'll be able to see it, but it may pop like that. Be ready for it. And then inside of this hole right here where the high pressure pump used to be is a tappet that actually contacts the cam. So let's go ahead and pull that out. Look at the size of that roller on there, huh? Pretty cool stuff. So we'll take that out. And now, because the engine is exposed, let's go ahead and plug that hole off. Okay. But now, our fuel lines are out of the way, and our high pressure line has a little bit of movement to it, so we can get the intake up and off of here. Okay, since we're here, let's go ahead and pull the bracket off for the engine appearance cover. It's right here, 10mm, 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 and we'll be able to slide this harness out of here. Woo! Bolts are a-flying. As long as they're not going to the engine, I'm okay with it. Let's get this one and this one. Should just be 3 on here. Lift this guy up and out of here. And we'll get this harness tucked back in here, just like that. At this point, I believe everything is disconnected from the intake manifold. So let's do one last cleanup with the compressed air on here, and then we'll start going after these bolts, and we'll lift it off of here. All right, so there's 4 bolts on each side. Okay, they're 8mm heads. There's one here, 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 and then back here. So we'll loosen those. We'll kind of crisscross back and forth to evenly decompress it, and then we should be able to just pull it up and off of here. So let's just jump around. Back here, they're actually pretty easy. As you guys can probably tell if you're following along, nothing on here is too hard at all. It's just a lot of pieces to take off. And then there's big ones up here. Here and here. Loose. Loose. These back ones. Just pull right out. They're pretty long too. They should be able to pick up on it at this point. Oh yeah, nice and sticky, nice and hot. Okay, so just pick it up there nice and even, getting past the lines and stuff like that. Try not to knock anything down into the engine, of course. All right, now once the intake is off, you can see there's some debris that just would not come out with compressed air. You don't want to hit with compressed air anymore. You want to actually vacuum it up. So we'll vacuum all this up, any grit down here, and then we're going to plug each one of these holes, either tape it across or put towels in them. Keep anything from falling in there. All right, look at that. We have the intake off. We're making some progress. Next, we're going to pull the valve covers off. Now, these are very easy to get off. There's a couple connectors. You have your VCT solenoid connectors, your coil connectors. Pull back on the red locking tabs. Depress the connector tang on there. Pull them off. Pull the 8mm bolts on each one of the coils, and the coils pop right up and out of there. And then you're just going to simply follow the harness along and see where it's retained on the valve cover all the way back. Then we're going to go ahead and start pulling all the bolts for the valve cover all the way along, all the way around. Same thing on the other side, and they'll simply lift right off of here. It's very, very simple on this engine. And then we'll get started on that front cover. Now we're going to start concentrating on the front cover here and pulling some of these coolant hoses, including this one right here. Now this one right here is actually a heater hose. You can see the feed there, and it goes out and over to right there, which I've disconnected. It's just a quick disconnect over there. We'll disconnect it, disconnect right there, and then you can just lay it down to the side, or I'm going to actually pull it off of here. That's that connection I said to watch out for, because it will leak. We're actually going to change it on this one for this customer. It's about a $55 hose, no big deal. We'll change it, make it like new for him. So the other hoses we need to take off, because there's a coolant crossover right here on the front cover built into it, is the upper radiator hose here, and then the lower one over here. You see there. So there's just constant tension clamps on there. pull them back and slide them off. Now this one over here, I'm warning you now, because it is dip, it's going to have a lot of coolant stuck in here. So get a container or glass that you don't use for drinking out of, and we can catch that coolant so it doesn't go all over the place. So we'll get these out of the way, and then we'll start unbolting this crossover right here, and then we'll work on the front cover accessory drive components. All right, next we're going to go ahead and remove the thermostat housing right here. Follow this hose over to the degas bottle, remove the clamp, and then just twist it off of there. We'll take it off with the housing. Now the housing is bolted in by 4 bolts to the front cover, and then it simply twists and slides right off of there. Now there's going to be some coolant spillage, so be ready for it. It's coming apart right there. Make sure your pan's ready down below, and then we'll loosen it from over here. All right, let's see if we can do this. Get it loose over here. We're going to hold this pipe over here, and then we're going to simply loosen it off of there. Just takes a little bit of finesse. And we'll get that out of here. What I'm going to use is my brake bleeder, and we're going to suck out all the coolant in this jacket right here. Alright guys, we're almost there. We have a few more items up front here and the front end accessory drive, and then we can start pulling the front cover. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to unbolt, loosen these bolts on the water pump pulley, and then we're going to pull the belt off, and then we're going to pull the coolant pump off. There's a bunch of housing bolts all the way around. So let's go ahead and break torque on all these bolts. While the belt is still on, holding it for us. And then we're going to take a 15 mil on our tensioner and turn it counterclockwise. And it may stick like that a little bit, but counterclockwise is correct. And then we'll just get the belt off. Get the belt out of here. And then we'll finish taking these bolts out. And the pulley. Let's go ahead and pull a tensioner also while we're right here. It's 10 mil bolts, 2 of them. Okay, here is our next challenge. Right here for the AC belt, they use a stretchy belt. What, when, where, and why they need a stretchy belt here instead of the main drive belt, I don't know. But the idea is to remove the tensioner from the equation. Maybe it's quieter, who knows. So these literally stretch into place, and that's it. So you have to walk them off and walk them on. And there's special tools for it, but they don't work so well either, so I don't advise you buying them. Now the idea here is they want you to use a belt, something like this, a strap like this, stick it underneath there, crank it over, and walk it into there. And that'll lift it from the pulley. And then you just yank it off. Or you can, while it's in there, work on walking it off. Okay? So this is the same idea that they use for the special tool. So we'll simply stick it into here. I know I'm blocking your view, but you'll get it once we start cranking here. It's just one of those things you got to deal with in these newer engines. They got all fancy with all these weird contraptions. So we'll turn it, get in there straight. Okay. I'm doing this 4 layers thick to really lift it off of there. We'll work it in there straight. Nice and straight. You gotta get these together. Just watch your fingers when you're doing this. Watch them, watch them, watch them. Okay, so with 4 layers thick on here, we're getting it going here pretty good. At this point, I would yank it. They want you to wrap it around like this. Okay, get your grip on it. Yank while you're turning. And it just takes a couple of revs. And you can see it walking off there though. There we go. Yes, that is how it goes 90% of the time, even with special tools. But you're literally walking it off of there. Now going back on, there is another tool, but it doesn't work on this particular setup. So we're actually going to hook it on here, then zip tie it to the crank pulley. Yes, that's the official procedure from Ford. And it works. It'll walk it on there. So we'll show you that here on the end. But it's off, and we can concentrate on pulling the crank pulley next. All right, there's an 18mm crank pulley bolt in the center. Pop that off. Oh yeah, there it is. Now in the front of the pulley, there's no threaded holes for a regular dampener puller. You need a 3-jaw puller, or this is the actual tool that Ford calls for. Fits in there perfect. So you hook it behind the slots in there, you'll see it from the bottom, and then you turn, and it will lock right into there. And I think this is the right one, the right center pin for it to press off of. It's a slick little system. So we'll get that on there, hooked on, and then we'll start pressing it off. All right, the puller is on here, nice and straight, should be good to go. Let's go ahead and press it off. Support it, and there it is. So the idea here is to use this piece that comes in the kit to press off of in the center of the crankshaft, and then on the pulley itself you can see there's 1, 2, and 3. So you put your 3-jaw in there and cock it to the right, the hook's behind them, and then you press off. Next, we'll get the alternator off to the side. So there's a stud right here that comes out. You took off the nut earlier for the bracket for the valve cover. It's a 7mm hex on there. We can loosen that and get that out of there. And then down below, there's a 15mm bolt. So we'll get those off and just flop it to the side. Get that out. And then our 7mm up top here. All right. Now this baby should just work its way off to the side. you're gonna have to deal with the adjustment down here that got pushed in. So you just come along, pry bar, and get it out of there. Work it up and out of there. There we go. And it'll be loose. Let's get this up and over. And that's the adjustment right there. That gets pushed in when the bolt gets tightened. So we'll tap that back out, and then it'll reset itself when we tighten the bolt going back in. Now let's turn our attention back to the coolant pump right here. The reason I didn't take it off yet is because it's going to spill a lot of coolant. So you don't want it all over the belts and all that stuff. So I just figured we'll wait till the very end before pulling the actual cover. Now what's going to help here is to use that brake bleeder tool or some other kind of suction device and just empty this cavity. It's a big old cavity behind there. It goes down and over to the impeller. And it's full. So what you want to do is just get that hose down in there and suck it out as much as you can. And then there's a bunch of 8mm bolts. I mean, they're all over. And this housing will come off, pump and everything. Okay. All right, it's empty. I sucked out 3 of these containers full out of that cavity. So if you don't have this tool, be ready for it. It's going to be a flood coming out of there. Either way, you want to do something to protect down here where the coolant can get into the crankcase down there. So with mine being so dry, I should be able to just use a rag like this. Got all the bolts loose, I think. Go down around. Except for this one, it's our hanger on. Okay, let's get a little pry action going. Everything's just stuck together after how many years. And the gasket that's behind here is one heck of a gasket. Monstrosity, actually. And then down here, it just sticks onto it. See over here, it's leaking. Can't do much about it. But down here, it sticks onto another pipe. Cross through. Let's get this last bolt out here. Hopefully you guys can see all this. So we have all the bolts out. Now we're just gonna get it away from there. And this other piece right here. It's pretty good. A few drips and that's it. At this point, this gasket right here will come right off. And that's that huge cavity inside of that I was sucking out, plus all the coolant that was actually bleeding back into here. It's just 3 containers full. And there it is. So at this point, all these front end components are off of here. Coolant pumps off of there, crank pulley, all that good stuff. So we can go ahead and pull some of these retainers down here for the wire harness going across real quick. And then it's just a bunch of these 10mm bolts. They're all over the place. They're all over the place. There's 22 of them. So take those out, and then we're gonna have to pry this sucker off too. There's a lot of sealant on here, and we're gonna have to pry it off just to break the bond. Now once all the bolts are out, you simply start prying at different points all the way around, just to make sure you have a nice even pry. Make sure all the bolts are out, of course, and that's not so bad. I'm gonna do it side to side like so. And then this sucker will come right up and out of here. And there you have it. Congrats if you made it this far. This is quite a feat. Many people don't like going in this far on these engines. But you have to get in here, and we have to fix it with all the latest parts. So we need to get in here and do it right. That's it, though. It's pretty cool how it's all open up here in the front. You can see. Everything looks like it's together. It's just a stretch of the chain, the primary chain here. It's freaking, I mean, it's super long. It's one piece, which was good in theory, but apparently they're stretching like crazy, causing these issues. All right, so let's take a little break, and then we'll go on to pulling all the old stuff off so we can rebuild it.